When you mention the term ghost cities, your mind instantly takes you to those eerie developments in North Korea or Turkmenistan. You picture something straight out of a horror film. Empty streets that were never meant for people. Buildings constructed for show, not for living. But what if I told you that massive untouched ghost cities exist in the heart of Africa? Not built by dictators for propaganda, but by democratically elected leaders who looked their own people in the eye and promised them a better future. What you're looking at costs more than some countries' entire GDP. Empty highways stretching toward vacant apartment towers, brand new neighborhoods with no neighbors, streets that echo with silence instead of life. Kenya's Konza city was supposed to be the Silicon Savannah. Angola's Nova Cidade de Kilamba promised homes for 200,000 people. Nigeria's Eco Atlantic marketed itself as Africa's Manhattan. They're all ghost towns now. But here's what they don't want you to know. These weren't accidents. They weren't well-meaning projects that just went wrong. The decisions were made in shadows. The money vanished into private pockets and the public got stuck with the bill. This isn't just about Africa. It's about how power really works when nobody's watching. The presentations were spectacular. Government officials stood before massive screens showing gleaming towers, bustling markets and highways free of traffic jams. They promised transformations. They promised prosperity. They promised a future worth believing in. Take Kenya's Konza city. The marketing materials looked like something out of Dubai. A technology hub that would rival Silicon Valley, complete with universities, business parks, and luxury housing. The government called it the Silicon Savannah and promised it would create 200,000 jobs. Drive there today and you'll find construction equipment sitting idle on empty lots. A few buildings stand half-finished, their windows dark. The grand vision became a handful of structures scattered across barren lands. Angola's Nova Cidade de Kilamba tells the same story. Chinese contractors built an entire city outside Luanda, complete with 750 apartment blocks, schools and shopping centers. It was designed for 500,000 residents. For years, it housed maybe 5,000 people. Entire neighborhoods sat empty while families in Luanda's slums couldn't afford to move there. Nigeria's Eco Atlantic promised to be different. Built on land reclaimed from the Atlantic Ocean, it was marketed as a luxury destination that would rival Manhattan. The promotional video showed yacht clubs, five-star hotels, and gleaming office towers. Meanwhile, Lagos floods regularly because the city's drainage systems haven't been upgraded in decades. You see the pattern here. Leaders promise solutions to real problems, then deliver projects that serve nobody except the wealthy elite who were never the ones struggling in the first place. The target market has always been wrong. These developments weren't built for ordinary families who need affordable housing. They were built for wealthy buyers who already had options. In Kenya, luxury estates in countries like Machakos and Kiambu remain strikingly underoccupied because regular families simply can't afford them. It's like stocking a supermarket entirely with imported caviar in a neighborhood where most families can barely afford rice. The shelves look impressive, but nobody's buying because nobody can afford what you're selling. But here's where it gets more interesting. Real estate experts have been pointing out these mismatches for years. The demand numbers never added up. The income levels didn't support the pricing. The market research was either ignored or never done properly in the first place. So if the economics were obviously flawed from day one, why did these massive projects get approved anyway? The answer brings us to the procurement scandals that made all of this possible. Public contracts became vehicles for moving money from government budgets into private pockets. The buildings weren't the real product. The corruption was. Ghana's Hope City followed the same playbook. Rwanda's Vision City 2020 promised the same transformation. The locations changed, but the structure stayed identical. Grand announcements, inflated contracts, empty results. These weren't development projects. They were elaborate money laundering schemes dressed up as urban planning. The ghost cities weren't failures of ambition. They were successful transfers of public wealth to connected insiders. And the most disturbing part, the same players keep getting new contracts. The same companies that delivered empty shells get hired for the next round of projects. The same officials who approve the failed deals get promoted to oversee even bigger budgets. The system isn't broken. It's working exactly as designed. But the real story isn't in the boardrooms where these deals get made. It's in the paper trail that shows where billions of dollars actually went. Public procurement in Kenya has been called the leading form of corruption in the country. But to understand how these ghost cities really work, you need to see the playbook that's been refined over decades. It started with Anglo leasing in the early 2000s. Government officials signed contracts with companies that barely existed for projects that were never meant to be completed. Fictitious firms received payments for passport systems and naval security equipment that never arrived. The money just vanished into offshore accounts. But Anglo leasing was practice. What came next was the real game. The Arur and Kimwerer dam projects show you how the system evolved. The Kenyan government signed contracts worth 1.2 billion euros with Italian firm CMC di Ravenna to build 2 massive dams. The money was paid up front. Construction began with great fanfare. Then nothing. Years passed. The dams were never completed. CMC di Ravenna had been paid billions for projects that exist only on paper. Even Kenya's finance minister was arrested in connection with the scandal, showing how deep these arrangements reached into government. Here's how the mechanics actually work. Contracts get inflated by 200 or 300% above realistic costs. That extra margin doesn't disappear into thin air. It flows back to the political figures who approve the deals and the middlemen who arrange them. Ghost companies play a crucial role. These are firms that exist only on paper, often registered in offshore jurisdictions where ownership can be hidden. They win contracts not because they're qualified, but because they're controlled by the right people. The actual work, if any gets done at all, is subcontracted to legitimate firms at a fraction of the inflated price. The difference between the contract value and the real cost becomes pure profit for the network. It's not corruption as an accident of the process. It's corruption as the entire point of the process. Kenya loses an estimated 7.8% of its GDP annually to corruption tied to these mega projects. That's roughly KSH 608 billion every year. To put that in perspective, that's more than the country spends on healthcare and education combined. Transparency International consistently ranks Kenya poorly on corruption indices, specifically because of systematic procurement fraud. The same patterns appear in project after project: inflated budgets, politically connected contractors, incomplete delivery, and public money that vanishes without accountability. But the most revealing part is how the same players keep winning new contracts. CMC di Ravenna wasn't blacklisted after the dam scandal. Companies linked to Anglo leasing didn't disappear from government contracting. The individuals who approved these deals didn't lose their positions. They got promoted. The revolving door spins constantly. Today's procurement officer becomes tomorrow's private consultant. This year's minister becomes next year's board member at the construction company. The network protects itself by ensuring everyone has skin in the game. Take the standard gauge railway project, budgeted at $3.8 billion. It became one of the most expensive railway projects per kilometer in the world. Chinese contractors handled construction, but Kenyan officials determined routing, stations, and contract terms. Somehow, a railway that should have cost half that amount ended up requiring loans that will burden the country for decades. The pattern is always identical. Grand announcements about transformative infrastructure, contracts awarded to politically connected firms, costs that balloon far beyond initial estimates, projects that deliver a fraction of what was promised, and debt that remains long after the ribbon-cutting ceremonies end. What makes the system so resilient is that it's designed to look legitimate from the outside. There are tender processes, evaluation committees, and oversight bodies, but the outcomes are predetermined. The real decisions happen in private meetings where public money gets divided among connected insiders. The ghost cities aren't monuments to failed ambition. They're receipts for successful theft. Every empty tower, every unused highway, every half-finished development represents money that flowed from public budgets into private accounts. And the bills for these phantom projects keep coming due, even when nothing was ever built. Every loan starts with a handshake and ends with handcuffs. Not literal ones, but the kind that bind entire nations to repayment schedules that stretch decades into the future. These ghost cities weren't just built with stolen money. They were built with borrowed money that citizens will be paying back long after the buildings crumble. Foreign lending became the perfect cover for corruption because it added layers of complexity that made tracking the money nearly impossible. Chinese banks, European development funds, and international financial institutions stepped forward with capital, packaged as development finance for governments desperate to show progress. But here's how the trap actually works. The loans are structured around specific infrastructure projects with repayment obligations that bind future budgets. That means even when a highway sits unused or an estate remains empty, taxpayers still carry the bill. It's like using one credit card to pay another, except the balance keeps growing and gets passed to your children. China's Belt and Road Initiative became the template for this across Africa. The promise was simple. Chinese contractors would build roads, railways, and ports using Chinese loans, and African countries would repay with natural resources or strategic concessions. What wasn't advertised was how quickly countries could lose control of the assets they were supposedly gaining. Djibouti learned this lesson the hard way. Chinese loans helped build the country's main commercial port, but when Djibouti couldn't meet repayment terms, China took operational control of the facility. A strategic asset that was supposed to boost the country's economy became a Chinese naval base in all but name. Kenya's debt service now consumes nearly 60% of government revenue. Think about that. More than half of every tax dollar collected goes to paying back loans for projects that may never deliver the promised benefits. That leaves 40 cents on every dollar for schools, hospitals, roads that actually work, and job programs that might employ real people. The World Bank estimates that African countries collectively owe more than $1 trillion in infrastructure debt. But the infrastructure isn't worth $1 trillion. Much of it sits incomplete, unused, or serving only a tiny fraction of the population it was supposed to help. Take Nigeria's example beyond Eco-Atlantic. The country borrowed billions for power plants that don't generate reliable electricity, refineries that don't process crude oil efficiently, and airports in cities that don't have enough passenger traffic to justify them. Meanwhile, basic power grids fail regularly, forcing businesses to run expensive generators and families to live without consistent electricity. The human cost shows up in budget cuts that happen quietly, without grand announcements or ribbon-cutting ceremonies. School construction gets delayed because debt service takes priority. Hospitals run short of equipment because loan payments can't be postponed. Job training programs get canceled because the money was already committed to Chinese contractors years earlier. But the cruelest part is how the debt gets structured to benefit everyone except the people who will pay it back. Contractors get paid up front, politicians get their kickbacks immediately, lenders get guaranteed returns backed by government revenues. Citizens get the bill spread across decades for cities they can't afford to live in and infrastructure they can't access. Future generations inherit not just the debt, but the obligation to keep paying for their parents' corruption. A child born in Kenya today will spend their working life paying taxes that go toward projects approved before they could walk, for buildings that stood empty throughout their childhood. The genius of the system is how it makes the theft look like investment. Every ghost city comes with economic projections showing job creation, tax revenue, and growth that will supposedly pay for itself. The numbers are fantasy, but they provide cover for deals that were always about moving money from public accounts to private ones. And here's the most disturbing part. New projects keep getting announced while old ones sit unfinished. The same playbook, the same promises, the same players, because the debt trap isn't a bug in the system. It's the feature that makes the whole scheme work. The numbers on government spreadsheets don't capture what happens to the farmers who lost their land for projects that never delivered. In Kenya's Machakos County, families were relocated from fertile farmland to make way for luxury developments that now sit largely empty. They were promised compensation and new opportunities. Most got neither. Local contractors tell a different story than the international firms that collected billions. Small Kenyan companies that supplied materials or provided services often went unpaid. When projects stalled or budgets mysteriously ran dry, meanwhile, foreign contractors had already transferred their payments offshore, protected by government guarantees that local businesses never received. The ripple effect reaches far beyond construction sites. Young Africans migrate to Europe in dangerous boat crossings, partly because the economic opportunities promised by these mega projects never materialized. The jobs that were supposed to come with new cities, new ports, and new industrial zones existed only in PowerPoint presentations. Environmental damage from abandoned construction sites creates lasting problems that outlive the political careers of those who approve them. Half-built structures become breeding grounds for disease. Incomplete drainage systems cause flooding. Excavated land sits exposed to erosion, damaging surrounding communities for years. The pattern repeats across the continent with depressing consistency. Ghana's Hope City was announced with great fanfare as a technology hub that would transform the country's economy. Construction began, government officials posed for photos, and then progress quietly stalled. The site now hosts scattered buildings and empty promises. Rwanda's Vision City 2020 followed the same script. Master plan showed a modern urban center that would house hundreds of thousands of residents. The reality is far more modest. A few completed structures surrounded by undeveloped land, while Kigali's existing neighborhoods still lack basic infrastructure. What makes this particularly cruel is how these projects consume resources that could address real needs. The money spent on empty luxury towers could have built thousands of affordable housing units. The funds that disappeared into phantom dam projects could have upgraded water systems that actually serve communities. But the human cost goes deeper than missed opportunities. It's about trust in institutions that gets eroded when citizens watch billions vanish while their daily struggles remain unaddressed. It's about democratic processes that become meaningless when major decisions get made in private meetings between politicians and contractors. The communities left behind aren't just geographical. They are entire generations who watch their governments choose prestige projects over practical solutions, foreign contractors over local businesses, and political theater over genuine development. This isn't incompetence. It's the system working exactly as designed. While you were watching this video, somewhere in Africa, officials were probably announcing another transformative mega project with the same promises, the same players, and the same inevitable outcome. The ghost cities aren't monuments to failure. They're proof of success for a network that turns public money into private wealth. New projects get announced while old ones sit empty because the buildings were never the point. So here's my question for you. If this same playbook keeps working, if the same people keep profiting while communities get left behind, what would it actually take to break the cycle? Subscribe to see how these same patterns play out in other industries where power operates in shadows.